Piers is such a fucking hypocrite. It's so funny watching him. But
And Piers Morgan is pretty hypocritical. But
I'm with my friends. Was there a like deeper insight than just admin to wrangle a squadron of chicks is kind of a bit of a hard day's work?
well, it wasn't even so much that it was hard, but it was just spending time doing things that I didn't care about. That was a part of it. And then the big realization was the pleasure, and how it functions like a drug and how you need more of it to, get the same high. And then eventually you have to do it to not feel like shit, that whole thing. So, yeah, I just beat all my addictions when I was writing my book. I beat my sex addiction, my gambling addiction, my weed addiction, which was actually one of the harder ones to beat.
so Dan Bilzerian has been in the headlines a lot, been talking about obviously just everything. People want to get to know what is on his mind, what is, what's getting him to get involved with a lot of the topics that he's been talking about. And so from this interview, you see that this is a person who apparently has been, had some demons that they were dealing with, and they've kind of ripped some of those demons away. And in that order, what happens is sometimes when you get rid of the clutter in your life, you start to notice the things that really do matter, and you start asking appropriate questions. And I think that's what happened to Dan.
And then I kind of like went back into all that stuff, and then kind of beat it again. And I think when you beat it a second time, you're just like, okay, like, we got like enough,
And where have you landed now? What's life like for you now?
Well, I spent the last 2 years working on this course, and I spent, a decent amount of time developing this new supplement product line and just hanging with my friends. Like I play paintball, I, work out, I mountain bike. I do shit with my boys, and I don't hang out with a bunch of girls all the fucking time. And
what about that differential in the hedonic set point waterline between sort of where you were and where you are? We all know what it kind of feels like to maybe be in a place. Everyone's been on holiday and had peak experiences and then had to go back to their sort of normal existence, and they go, oh my God, this sort of feels a bit gray and a bit dull. What was that deceleration like?
I would imagine it would be like quitting heroin, maybe. It was like the one drug I didn't do. But yeah, I think it's tough. You ever seen the gambling show Owning Mahoney, or the movie?
No.
So it's a true story about this guy, and he's a huge gambling addict, and he makes about $20,000 a year. And at one point in the movie, he's embezzled so much money from his bank that he's betting $70,000 a hand on baccarat, and he's like $5 million in debt, driving like a $3,000 car, and he's married, and like his wife has no idea. And then he ends up winning like $10 million. So he could pay off like the $4 or $5 million and like literally be set for life. And this is in the 80s when like $1 million was like enough. And he ends up losing it all back, like every dollar, and goes to jail. And it's funny because they had an interview afterwards, and they asked him, they said, on a scale of 1 to 100, what would you rate, your highest thrill in life? And he's like, gambling. And he goes, 100. And they said, outside of gambling, what's the greatest thrill you've ever had in your entire life? And he's like, I think about a 20. And the guy's like, how do you feel about living at a 20 for the rest of your life? And I think when you do like max pleasure seeking, it's tough because you kind of like numb yourself.
So he makes a good point here. What he's saying, he's like telling a story, again, like I said, this is a person who's obviously not perfect. I think that what we do is sometimes we judge people who are coming with a message. We're talking about some stuff in reality, like, oh, well, what they used to do, they used to womanize, they used to do this, they used to do drugs, whatever. But it shows you, for me, I'm a little bit more religious. So for me, it's like God used Moses when he was stuttering. So, God can use people at any moment in their life. So I think that what I take from him is that, even when you're at the roughest time in your life, you're still worth it. You know what I mean? And there's still more for you. So just keep believing in yourself. But I wanted to see how he deals with the public scrutiny, because we know that he's getting a lot of it. And a lot of these podcasts aren't going to ask him the kind of questions that I want to hear. But, it is what it is.
What about the public scrutiny? You kind of mentioned it earlier on. There seemed to be a period, I can't remember when it was, maybe like 4 or 5 years ago or whatever, when it just felt like people criticizing financial statements. This is where Ignite is. This is actually what's going on behind the scenes. So what happened with all of that, and how accurate have those predictions been?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. Like, I think it was like 4 years ago. They're like, Dan Bilzerian's going broke. Like, he's, fleeing the country. He's going to jail. Ignite's going bankrupt. It's like all this stuff. And it was just funny because I think I was worth like 375 million at the time or so. I was like worth more than I'd like almost ever been. Like Ignite was actually doing really well at that point. Like, yeah, we'd lost 50 million, but a lot of companies, they spend a lot of money on marketing, and we've done like 100 million in sales at least every year for the last like 3 or 4 years, just in vapes alone. And so, like I think Uber lost like 5 billion in a quarter or something, and they were like never profitable. Like, I just don't think people understand companies. And we were also in the wrong space. We were doing weed in a environment where the government was like heavily taxing the people that are doing it legally, and nobody's making money. But whatever, it's like, it was one of those things where all these YouTube people were making all these like crazy claims and this clickbait. And because of that, they were getting a bunch of views because, you could just say whatever you.
By the way, guys, if you do like this video, please don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button and the notification bell. Thank you so much to everybody who watches.
Want. That's the thing about a celebrity, is like you could say whatever you want, like literally whatever you want, and there's no recourse. You can't really sue them. Like at best you could get a retraction, but like the legal language, unless you say that they have AIDS or something, like medically, you can say whatever the fuck you want. And so I was in a weird position because my videos were getting like 50 million views, and my stories were getting like 8 to 12 million views a story, and my Snapchats were getting like 3 million. So it was like, do I want to shine a light on all these retards, which is probably what they want, you know what I mean? That's why you make clickbait in the first place, and address this stuff, or do I just want to like focus on my book? And I just kind of like focused on my book and just ignored all the nonsense. But it was shocking like how much people believed. Like they were just like, oh, like, Dan's going broke, and I'm just like flying around my jet, like a fucking house paid for, like all this crazy shit. And it's like, the fuck, like I've got $4 million in watches, but I didn't like flex that. I didn't like, I just didn't give a fuck. I was just like, whatever, dude. But it's funny, like the people just believe kind of like whatever they read. And see, I think they're getting better now because of COVID and because how many times the media has lied to them. They're starting to figure it out. But I don't know. I mean, it was a weird thing. And so then that's kind of one of the reasons that I did come back a little bit, and I started posting a little bit again, because when I stopped for the book, that was kind of the time when I realized, like, and reflected on my life. I was like, okay, like I kind of don't want to do this anymore or whatever. But I, for the company, I was like, okay, like, we'll go back and, give them a quick fuck you. And that's what I did. And then after doing that, I was like, okay, now I want to go back to like being a normal person. But yeah, it's surprising, man. People just, they'll just believe what any YouTube video says, and there's not really any regulation. I mean, if I were to make the laws, it would be that if you knowingly, like, said something on a media outlet that you knew was false, there would be repercussions, but there's just not.
It's going to be very difficult to prove.
I was going to say that is very difficult to prove, but he actually said exactly what I was thinking. He said that he fell back. He fell back from writing his book and starting to pay attention to what other things that are going on, more important things. And I do have a recent tweet of his that I am going to share, but I just want to hear just a little bit more of what he's saying.
Prove that you knew that it was false as well, right? I thought that the numbers worked that way. I guess it's going to be kind of slippery.
Yeah, I suppose so. But I think there is like an element of responsibility when you have a big platform. Like, Piers Morgan just went crazy on Tate the other day because he, said something that wasn't true. It's like, where were you during COVID when you were telling everybody else to get the vaccine and all this other stuff? It's like, do you, like condemn the media? Do you condemn this? Like Piers is such a fucking hypocrite. It's so funny watching him. But it's funny because there is no responsibility. Like the media doesn't have any responsibility. Like Alex Jones says something that they say is, false and hurts people, and he gets fined $1.5 billion, and the media says a bunch of stuff that kills a bunch of people and there's no repercussions. Like, how does that work? Like at what point is there repercussions and at what point isn't there?
How did that period of life?
And that is a good question. What point is there repercussions and what point isn't there? He's absolutely right to ask that question, especially considering what he's going through right now. And Piers Morgan is pretty hypocritical, but, I mean, like I said, this is a person who I give them credit for even stepping out of their comfort zone to make some of the statements, ask some of the questions that they're asking, because it's easier for somebody to just chill, be rich, and act like they don't see anything going on. And we know that it's easier because we have a lot of people who do that already. And like I said, he did tweet something today: question anything they tell you. You can't question. This is the person who is taking their platform, with the responsibility to at least try to make people aware of, hey, you need to be asking questions. And if I can't get anything else out of somebody and that's all I can get, take it. Because there's not enough people saying that.